Hi, and welcome to the fourth episode of Roots. I hope that this has been a helpful series to you so far. We're mixing theology with practical application, and we're actually continuing to lay a foundation that we'll be coming back to and building on as we go through this series. So let's dive right in. I want you to imagine having an opportunity to review your life. Not like you're probably thinking, not from the perspective of what has happened, but from the perspective of what could have happened, or maybe better to say, what we didn't see if God had not intervened. For example, I think our jaws would drop if we could see how many times we were close to danger, and we never knew it. How an unexpected delay in leaving for work a bit late one day kept us from an accident that would have occurred. Or how God protected our kids from encountering someone who could have hurt them. How God caused the events of our lives to fall in place so that we were in the right place at the right time, and we weren't in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, if it was possible to roll back time like that and to see behind the scenes, I am sure that our gratitude would be deeper and our love for God greater. For these first few weeks, we've been talking about sin and how it breaks our relationship with God and puts us in a place deserving judgment. Maybe it's hard to see how our seemingly little acts of sin have such great consequence, but they do. And as I said last week, our broken relationship with God cannot be fixed by reformation, by re-education, by trying harder, or by religious practices. We need to be rescued. Now in Ephesians 2, verses 1 through 3, Paul is writing to people who have been rescued. But before he writes about the great rescue that God has accomplished in them, he rolls back the film of their lives and our lives so that they and we can see what we've been rescued from. So let's read the passage and learn from what Paul says. Ephesians 2, 1 through 3. And you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. What Paul is saying here is true of every one of us. It's true of every Christian from every time and every place. And I want to just highlight what he says in this passage. The first thing is that we were dead. By the way, do you know what the Greek word for dead really means? It means dead. Not still flailing about just a little, wiggling a little bit. Not alive, but on life support. Not in some kind of spiritual coma. It means dead, D-E-A-D, without life. And I emphasize that because we're going to see why understanding what dead means is so important in the coming weeks. Secondly, he tells us that we once walked in our trespasses and sins. Now, you know that he often uses the word walk as a synonym for live. So he told us that we once lived in our trespasses and sins. And those two words mean pretty much the same thing, and they refer to offenses against God, moments of disobedience, times we ignored him, ways in which we decided we were going to do what we wanted to do. He says that we followed the course of this world, that we were quite at home and shaped by the sinful culture of the world in which we lived, a world system energized by Satan, God's arch enemy. He then says we followed the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and mind. And then, to sum it up, he says we were by nature children of wrath. Now that's a lot, and that's pretty heavy stuff. And we might want to say, wow, Paul, thanks for the encouragement. But Paul is not trying to rub it in. He's not trying to make us feel bad. He's not trying to cause us to wallow in guilt. He's reminding us of the state of our existence before Christ rescued us, an existence that describes every person outside of Christ. It's an existence shared by everyone from nice old ladies and polite children to the hardest of criminals, because humanity is a mess. We need to see ourselves as God once saw us. In verse 4, which we'll look at in a week or two, Paul turns in a very different direction. Verse 4 begins with the word but. And that word in verse 4 is a word of hope. It's going to lead us to a mind-altering, life-shaping perspective. It does not ignore what we were, but it puts its arm around our shoulder and leads us to something new and better. So don't be afraid to look at yourself. Don't be afraid to acknowledge who you were and then move on from there. We need to realize what we were in God's eyes before Christ. Or if you are not yet a Christian, you need to realize who you are and who you can be when God comes to the rescue. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. God bless you.